Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our first Blockchain Marketing Forum. My name is Steve Smith. I'm the Editorial Director of Events here at MediaPost. Those of you who are, I think you all know who MediaPost is, and welcome. We come at things a little differently here. For those of you who have been receiving and looking at our journalism over the past 20 years, part of our job here at MediaPost is to contextualize. And sometimes contextualization is a bit of a downer. It puts things in perspective. It fights against the hype. And that's sort of what our job is here. So when we do a morning forum, our first foray into a topic like blockchain, we come at it with a lot of history. We come at it with a degree of skepticism and critical perspective that comes from having covered this field for 20 years, and for many of us, long before this. I was a media studies scholar before I became a trade journalist, and most of the journalists and editors working at MediaPost have been doing this going back into the 80s. So we've seen a lot of these trends and a lot of the bright, shiny objects come into the market over the years. And part of our job here is to interrogate, not to cheerlead, is to try to put these things into the perspective, not only of history, but also the ways in which marketers, brand marketers, advertisers, agencies do their jobs, the ways in which these new phenomena might or might not fit within a set of systems, protocols, traditions, goals, marketing goals that marketers and agencies bring to it. That's our job here, is to put that lens of the media and marketing world onto these new trends and try to understand them. So as we spend part of this morning looking and interrogating and examining some of the trends and ideas, it's important to keep in mind a little bit of history about digital technology and the ways in which blockchain fits within a 20, 30-year tradition of digital emerging. Because one of the things, as I look at this phenomenon, and I admit that I am still learning, I'm trying to figure a lot of this out, I, like you, I hope we'll be learning a lot this morning, is that a lot of the fundamental claims around blockchain as it moves especially into marketing and digital media, a lot of these have been made around many other technologies before it. In fact, in many ways, blockchain tries to extend a lot of the promises of digital into that next level. But also, I think we have to look back and recognize that a lot of the results of those promises have been at best mixed. From the very beginning of digital media, in fact, the basic promises that are often made around blockchain of decentralization, of data, of power, and to some degree democratization of all of those things. They've been intrinsic to digital from the very beginning. One of the first conversations I ever had with anyone, a PC geek back in 1985, was around this very topic. He promised me that with PCs in the workplace, it meant a radical decentralization and democratization of the workplace, because now it would empower individual workers to communicate directly with their bosses, to get their ideas out there. It would flatten the hierarchy because ideas would flow so much more effectively. So those of you who work in major corporations, I'm sure you're feeling a lot more empowered these days, aren't you? This legend of the digital economy was that it would spawn countless new startups, businesses, allow for small companies and give them tremendous leverage in the market that they otherwise wouldn't have. And of course, to some degree, we always hear the stories of how that's true. But in the aggregate, if you actually look at the marketplace, startups in America are at a 40-year low. And in many ways, we have seen digital technology lead to a greater centralization of power and money than the opposite. It's very ironic that this digital medium, which was supposed to allow for the diffusion of power and the diffusion of money and control, has led to probably the greatest concentration of wealth and power that we have ever seen in any medium until then, over 2 centuries of mass communication. In media, the convergence of money and power in 2 large companies is unprecedented in media history. Programmatic technology is a technology that we have followed very closely, have written about extensively, have had many shows about over the years. Think of the many promises that we ourselves first covered and held in conferences when we were doing this 10, 12 years ago. Think about how it was supposed to finance this long tail of journalism and media, the ways in which it would micro-target consumers so that it would not only be more effective, but it would lift branding effects. If you remember, programmatic was supposed to bring in this onrush of branding money, and raise CPMs for everybody. And the technology was not supposed to be threatening to media buyers' roles, but it was going to free them up to do more higher-level strategy and free up creative. Again, at best, the results of a lot of those promises have been mixed. So my point is not that these promises are to be ignored or to dismissed, but that the general promises that often come at the center of blockchain rhetoric around democratization, around decentralization, around the diffusion of power and transparency, it's not that they're misleading. It's that, in fact, media over the last 2 centuries that have come into the market, they have all promised to some degree those fundamental things. And we have seen a lot of unintended consequences complicate those matters, so that we didn't always end up with what we thought we were going to end up with. There was an awful lot of course correction that happened along the way. Very often the thing that we thought the technology was going to drive ended up driving exactly the opposite. And these are things that are important to keep in mind, the unexpected consequences of purposive action, and the ways in which course corrections change over time. For instance, considering the efficiencies that can often be gained in one area at the same time, create tremendous inefficiencies elsewhere. Programmatic is one good example of this. Think about how much of your media spend is actually going to media now. Think about the ways in which the technology imposed a tech tax that in many ways we didn't see coming, the ways in which additional layers of technology had to be put on top of programmatic systems in order to correct all the problems that programmatic was raising. These are the sorts of complexities that new ideas and new technologies introduce into the marketplace. And again, I'm not trying to start us on a downer so much as provide that context. It's important as we talk about blockchain within the system to understand the things that have come before it and the ways we've seen technologies evolve, because it's really complicated. It's not as simple as a new technology simply comes with a new set of values and ideas and goals, plops into the marketplace, and it all turns out well in the end. In many ways, it simply becomes more complicated, and we see the ways in which institutions like media and marketing absorb those technologies, the ways in which they limit them, the way in which they gear them towards certain ends. And the claims around blockchain are very big, and we need to take those into account. Think about the things that we've heard, and we'll talk about this morning, the ways in which we think at heart blockchain methods and technologies can allow for a total accountability among media buyers and sellers, a new visibility into the manufacture and the distribution of goods. I've seen models where people are going to be able to aim their cell phone at a product on the shelf, and blockchain will allow, an open ledger will actually allow them to see the entire supply chain that fed into that product. Will we actually see that visibility? Will the marketplace allow it? Will the marketplace even tolerate it? Will consumers even care whether they want to see that? We don't know this yet. It promises greater control by consumers over their privacy and data. I've seen some blockchain models that argue that now this will allow a system where people will be able to take greater control of their data and even monetize their own data in more interesting ways. Greater transparency into where the money goes in any transaction, not just media buying, but also throughout the consumer chain. Easier implementation of microtransactions. I've heard and seen models in which now blockchain will simply allow for that kind of microtransaction in media buying that we always were hoping for and would fuel new ideas in media models. Solution for ad fraud. The ideas go on, and it's important for us to take them into account and to put them into perspective and have a sense of where these technologies often can lead and the ways in which it's the culture that drives technological change, not the technology itself. It's the ways in which the technologies are incorporated into traditions, the limits that we put on them, the direction that we aim them. And that's what we're going to try to get to a bit here. And we're going to take a really complex topic and try to simplify it in the sense of just break it down into 2 areas. We just have 2 main panels this morning. One is going to focus on the ways in which blockchain may or may not impact the media buying and selling process and our understanding of the very complicated ad supply chain that has emerged over the last 10 years. And then we're going to look at everything else. we're going to look at the ways in which blockchain can change and flatten and make more transparent a whole set of different transactions, not just monetary transactions, but transactions and relationships between consumers and brands. But we're going to start with where I think we should start, which is a primer. What the hell is this? And what are the various main ways in which we can foresee blockchain methods and technology impacting a lot of what marketers and media buyers do. To start us off with exactly that is Rolf Swinton. He works at GfK. He's the director of data assets there. He's helping GfK bring together their data assets and aim it towards new models. He has been involved in VC funds for mobile and digital. He co-founded RealityMine a number of years ago. Please welcome Rolf Swinton.